Captain Mack Reynolds had spent 14 years in the United Earth Fleet before landing what was supposed to be the cushiest assignment in human history. Commanding officer of the UEF Excessive Force, humanity's premier diplomatic vessel. Yes, someone in the naming department clearly had a sense of humor. A massive starship bristling with weapon systems and painted in calming pastels with a name that screamed "We come in peace, but also maybe don't test us." A classic humanity. "Captain, we're approaching the Vraxian diplomatic coordinates," First Officer Tanya Ortiz announced, not looking up from her console. "ETA 3 minutes. Reynolds nodded, tugging at his dress uniform collar. The thing was designed to look impressive rather than feel comfortable. Another stellar example of human priorities in space. "Remind me again why I agreed to this assignment," he muttered. Because you said," and I quote, "How hard can first contact be? They're just aliens." "Not my ex-wife," Ortiz replied with a perfectly straight face. "Right. Well, let's hope the Vraxians have a better sense of humor than Jessica did." The bridge crew chuckled nervously. This was humanity's first official diplomatic contact with the Vraxian Empire, a species that had already colonized 12 star systems, but had, surprisingly, shown no hostility toward human expansion. Initial probe-based communications suggested they were amenable to establishing formal relations. A straightforward mission. According to the briefing. Comms Officer Davidson, prepare the greeting package. Full diplomatic protocol, nothing fancy. Yes, sir. Transmitting the standard "We come in peace" message, universal translation matrix, and cultural primer. Oh, and I included that greeting hologram the cultural team prepared. Reynolds nodded. The hologram was simple enough: a human figure raising its right hand, palm forward, with a friendly smile. Universal body language for hello across thousands of Earth cultures, extensively tested, and foolproof. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a Vraxian diplomatic vessel. It was oddly beautiful, if somewhat unsettling, all elegant curves and bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with a bluish light. A far cry from the boxy, utilitarian design of human ships. "We're being hailed," Captain Davidson announced. On screen. The face that appeared made several bridge officers flinch. The Vraxians resembled nothing so much as 7-foot-tall praying mantises with iridescent exoskeletons and 4 compound eyes arranged in a disconcertingly asymmetrical pattern. The universal translator kicked in as the alien began to speak. "This is High Commander Zrek of the glorious Vraxian Empire. State your purpose, human vessel." Reynolds cleared his throat. "High Commander, I am Captain Mack Reynolds of the United Earth Fleet. We come in peace to establish diplomatic relations between our peoples." He gestured for Davidson to transmit the greeting package. The hologram of the human figure appeared between them, smiling and raising its hand in greeting. The reaction was immediate and bewildering. The High Commander recoiled violently, mandibles clicking in what the translator identified as extreme distress. Other Vraxians visible in the background began what appeared to be emergency procedures. "You dare?" screeched the High Commander. "You dare threaten the entire Vraxian Empire with the death gesture?" Reynolds blinked. "I what?" "No, that's just a wave. A greeting." Silence. "You have shown us the 5-digited death palm. You have smiled, revealing your bone teeth. These are the 2 most grievous threats in the known galaxy." "There's been a misunderstanding," Reynolds said quickly, feeling the situation spiraling out of control. "In our culture, these gestures signify. We care not for your barbaric explanations. The Vraxian Empire has received your declaration of war, and we shall respond accordingly. Prepare to witness the might of a civilization that has subjugated a dozen star systems." The transmission cut abruptly. For several seconds, the bridge was silent. "Did we just," Ortiz began, "accidentally declare war on an alien empire by waving hello?" Yes, we did," Reynolds said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Davidson, get me fleet command. And someone find me the cultural attaché who approved that hologram. I'd like to have a word." "Sir," the tactical officer interrupted. "Vraxian vessel powering weapons." Reynolds sighed deeply. Shields up. Let's not start an interstellar incident by getting ourselves blown up 5 minutes into first contact. The Vraxian ship fired a warning shot that dissipated harmlessly against the Excessive Force's shields. Sir, their weapon technology is, well, it's about 50 years behind ours, the tactical officer reported, sounding almost embarrassed for the aliens. Of course it is, Reynolds muttered. Stand down weapons. Let's not escalate this further. Helm, get us out of here. Nice and easy. No sudden movements that might be mistaken for, I don't know, a declaration of galactic genocide. As the Excessive Force retreated from Vraxian space, Reynolds couldn't help but wonder how humanity's first interstellar war would play out, based on what he'd just seen, either very quickly or very, very stupidly. Let me get this straight, Admiral Elena Blackwood said, her voice dangerously calm as she paced the length of the war room. You waved at them. Reynolds stood at attention, though his posture conveyed more resignation than military discipline. Yes, Admiral. You waved. And they declared war. That's correct, Admiral. Blackwood stopped pacing and turned to face the assembled leadership of Earth's unified military command. 12 grim-faced men and women representing the finest military minds humanity had to offer, gathered around a holographic display of Vraxian territory. None of them looked particularly impressed. Well, Blackwood said after a long pause, that has to be a new record for fastest diplomatic disaster in human history. Congratulations, Captain Reynolds, you've made the history books. Reynolds wisely said nothing. General Marcus Wong, head of Earth Intelligence, cleared his throat. If I may, Admiral, our initial assessment of Vraxian military capabilities is interesting. Interesting how? Blackwood raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. Wong tapped his datapad, and the holographic display shifted to show Vraxian military assets. The Vraxians have conquered 12 star systems, as they claimed. However, all 12 were inhabited by pre-spaceflight civilizations. They've never actually faced an adversary with comparable technology. You're saying they're bullies, Blackwood said flatly. Essentially, yes. They find developing worlds, show up with flashy lights and what passes for advanced technology in their minds, and the locals surrender without a fight. Every single time. Reynolds frowned. So they have no actual combat experience against a technologically advanced opponent? None whatsoever, Wong confirmed. Their weapons systems are generations behind ours. Their FTL capability is rudimentary at best, and their tactical doctrines, from what we can assess, are, well, let's just say they've never had to develop any. A peculiar smile spread across Admiral Blackwood's face, the kind of smile that had earned her the nickname Excessive Elena among the fleet. It was the smile she wore before ordering a show of force that typically resulted in the opposing side reconsidering their life choices. So they declared war on us without having any idea what they're up against, she said, almost purring with satisfaction. Oh, delightful. Reynolds felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that tone all too well. Admiral, I believe a measured response would be most appropriate, he ventured. Perhaps a demonstration of our defensive capabilities while we attempt to re-establish diplomatic. Captain Reynolds, Blackwood interrupted. The time for diplomacy ended when they fired on your ship. What the Vraxians need is an education, a very thorough, very memorable education on why declaring war on humanity is a poor decision. She turned to the assembled officers. Ladies and gentlemen, I propose Operation Ridiculous Overkill. That's not a real operation name, is it? Reynolds asked weakly. It is now, Blackwood replied with disturbing cheer. General Wong, please brief us on Vraxian psychology. Wong nodded. They respect only overwhelming displays of force. Subtlety is lost on them. According to our xenopsychologists, the Vraxians must be shown, in no uncertain terms, that they are outmatched on every conceivable level. Perfect, Blackwood said, rubbing her hands together like a cartoon villain. Then we shall give them a demonstration they will never forget. I want the 7th Fleet mobilized immediately, and get me Dr. Felix Hammer from RD. Reynolds paled. Dr. Hammer? The weapons designer? Admiral, with all due respect, his designs are exactly what we need. Blackwood finished for him. Excessive. Flashy. Completely unnecessary. In other words, perfect for communicating with the Vraxians in terms they'll understand. She pointed at Reynolds. Captain, since you got us into this mess, you'll serve as my liaison for this operation. I want you front and center when we show these oversized insects what humanity calls overkill. Reynolds closed his eyes briefly, envisioning his promising career circling the drain. Yes, Admiral. As the meeting adjourned, General Wong approached Reynolds with a sympathetic expression. For what it's worth, Captain. I've served with Blackwood before. When she gets like this. We're doomed? Reynolds suggested. Wong chuckled. No, the enemy is. Try to enjoy the show. The next 3 weeks were a blur of activity that Reynolds could only describe as humanity showing off for the sake of showing off. The shipyards around Mars were working overtime, churning out vessels that ranged from practical to patently absurd. Earth's unified military had apparently been sitting on weapon designs that someone really should have questioned the necessity of a long time ago. Explain to me again why we need ships shaped like ancient Earth sea creatures, Reynolds asked, staring at the holographic display of a destroyer-class vessel distinctly resembling a shark. Psychological warfare, replied Dr. Felix Hammer without looking up from his tablet. The man was a genius, no question, but a genius with the social awareness of a particularly obtuse rock and the fashion sense to match. Today he was sporting a lab coat covered in cartoon explosions over a t-shirt that read, "If you can read this, you're within range." The Vraxians evolved from creatures similar to Earth's insects, Hammer continued. Their primitive ancestors were hunted by aquatic predators, deep genetic memory. The shark design triggers fear responses, and the giant glowing eyes on the front. Also psychological warfare. The paint job that makes it look like it's smiling. Same. The ability to play baby shark over all communication frequencies? Dr. Hammer finally looked up. That was Admiral Blackwood's personal request. I don't question the Admiral. Reynolds sighed. Smart man. Across the hangar bay, a group of engineers was installing what appeared to be entirely decorative laser arrays on a cruiser. They served no functional purpose whatsoever, but they did light up impressively when the ship powered up. Captain, called a cheerful voice. Reynolds turned to see Lieutenant Commander Prisha Jindal approaching, an alien in tow. The alien was humanoid, with pale blue skin and delicate facial tendrils that twitched nervously. This is Ambassador Cleavon of the Arcturus Collective, Jindal introduced. They've agreed to serve as neutral observers for our demonstration. Ambassador, Reynolds nodded respectfully. Welcome aboard. Dace. Thank you, Captain, Cleavon replied, eyeing the surrounding activity with obvious confusion. I must admit, I don't understand your species' approach to this conflict. The Vraxians declared war. Yes, but your response seems excessive? Overblown? Completely disproportionate, Reynolds offered. I was going to say performative, but those work too. Reynolds laughed. That's actually a perfect term for it. Humanity has always had a flair for the dramatic. Would you like a tour of our preparations? Over the next hour, Reynolds guided the bemused ambassador through what could only be described as a military circus. In one section, technicians were loading what Dr. Hammer had dubbed confetti bombs weapons that combined a harmless sonic pulse with an explosion of brightly colored, biodegradable particles. For celebrating after we disabled their ships, Hammer had explained with disturbing enthusiasm. I don't understand, Cleavon said, watching soldiers practice elaborate formation maneuvers that seemed designed purely for visual impact. In my culture, warfare is conducted with solemn efficiency. This looks more like entertainment. That's because for humans, sometimes making a point is more important than winning efficiently, Reynolds explained. We could probably end this conflict with a single stealth strike, but that wouldn't accomplish our actual goal, which is making sure no one else makes the same mistake the Vraxians did. Reynolds gestured around them. This isn't just a military operation. It's a message to the galaxy, don't mess with humans. We're crazy enough to go to these lengths just to make a point. Meanwhile, across the solar system, Vraxian spies were observing the preparations with increasing alarm. One such spy, embedded as a maintenance worker on Ganymede, managed to transmit a final report before being discovered. The humans. The report began. They're insane. They're turning warfare into performance art. They're painting their warships with faces. They've developed weapons that seem designed specifically to humiliate rather than kill. And they're laughing. Always laughing. Like this is some kind of game to them. We have made a terrible mistake. The report ended abruptly as the spy was caught not by security forces, but by Dr. Hammer, who proceeded to give the terrified Vraxian a 2-hour tour of his latest inventions, complete with enthusiastic demonstrations. When the day of deployment finally arrived, the fleet assembled with unnecessary fanfare. Ships arranged themselves in formation not for tactical advantage, but because it looks cooler this way, according to Admiral Blackwood. "This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever been part of," Reynolds muttered as he took his position on the bridge of the flagship. The newly commissioned UEF completely reasonable response. "Cheer up, Captain," Blackwood said, patting his shoulder. "Think of it as performance art with explosions." "That doesn't make me feel better, Admiral. It wasn't supposed to." "Fleet status?" "All ships report ready, Admiral." "Formation is pretty, I suppose." "Excellent. Signal the fleet. Operation Ridiculous Overkill is a go." As the massive human armada engaged their FTL drives in perfect synchronization, another completely unnecessary flourish, Reynolds couldn't help but wonder if somewhere, somehow, the universe was laughing at him. The Vraxian defense fleet waited at the edge of their home system, arrayed in what their tactical manuals described as the formation of inevitable victory. It had worked flawlessly against the pre-industrial civilizations of Belter IV and the Bronze Age warriors of Crimson Moon. The High Command was confident it would work equally well against these upstart humans. High Commander Zrek stood on the bridge of the Imperial Devastator, mandibles clicking with anticipation. Status of the human fleet. Approaching from Sector 7. "High Commander," his sensor officer reported. "They will arrive in approximately." The space before them erupted in a kaleidoscope of light as the human fleet emerged from FTL, not in the standard staggered arrival pattern of most spacefaring races, but simultaneously, creating a shockwave of displaced energy that rippled across the Vraxian sensors and temporarily blinded their forward arrays. "What in the name of the Hive Queen was that?" Zrek demanded. "It appears the humans coordinated their FTL exits for maximum visual impact, High Commander," the science officer replied, confusion evident in his voice. "It served no tactical purpose. It was just shiny. Impossible. No species would waste such precision on mere aesthetics in battle." The communications officer interrupted. "High Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." On screen, Admiral Blackwood's face appeared, bearing an expression that humans would recognize as cat, who found unattended cream, but that translated to Vraxians as predator who has already won. "High Commander Zrek, I presume?" "Admiral Elena Blackwood of the United Earth Fleet. I understand there's been a misunderstanding between our peoples." Zrek chittered dismissively. "There is no misunderstanding, human. You displayed the death gesture. You bared your bone teeth. These are acts of war." "Yes, about that. Captain Reynolds has explained the cultural confusion. In human culture, those gestures mean hello and I'm friendly. No threat was intended. Your intentions are irrelevant. The Vraxian Empire has spoken. Prepare to be annihilated." Blackwood sighed dramatically. "I was afraid you'd say that." "Very well. If it's a demonstration you want," she glanced off screen. "Dr. Hammer, you may proceed with Test 1. Before Zrek could respond, a small, unassuming probe detached from the human flagship and drifted toward the Vraxian formation. Sensors indicated it was unarmed. "They send us a probe? As a weapon?" Zrek laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Target that object and destroy it." 3 Vraxian destroyers opened fire simultaneously. Their energy beams struck the probe and passed straight through it. It's a hologram, the tactical officer exclaimed. Correct. Blackwood's voice came through the comm. What you're seeing is a little something we call a distributed holographic decoy. There are actually 5,000 microscopic projectors creating that image. Good luck hitting them all. As if to demonstrate, the single probe hologram multiplied into hundreds, then thousands, each one appearing identical to Vraxian sensors. This is a trick, Zrek snarled. A distraction. Oh, it's definitely that. Blackwood agreed cheerfully, but it's also a delivery system. The holograms converged on the Vraxian fleet as they made contact with ship hulls. Each one flashed brilliantly and dispersed, leaving behind what appeared to be. Are those stickers? Reynolds asked incredulously from his position behind Blackwood. Nano-adhesive morale decreases, Dr. Hammer corrected from his station. Completely harmless, but impossible to remove without specialized equipment. The view screen showed Vraxian ships now decorated with cartoon smiley faces, Earth tourism slogans, and the phrase "My other ship" is also a disappointment in 27 languages. Phase 2. Blackwood ordered with evident enjoyment. The human fleet's formation shifted, breaking into smaller groups that surrounded the Vraxian armada. What followed could only be described as a demonstration of technological superiority so thorough it bordered on bullying. Human fighters executed maneuvers that Vraxian pilots could only watch in stunned amazement. Larger vessels deployed defense systems that casually swatted away Vraxian weapons fire as if it were mildly annoying rain. Most humiliatingly, several human ships activated what appeared to be massive holographic scorecards, rating each Vraxian attack attempt on a scale of 1 to 10, complete with sarcastic commentary. This isn't warfare, Reynolds murmured, watching the spectacle unfold. This is humanity showing off at an interstellar level. Precisely the point, Captain, Blackwood replied without taking her eyes off the tactical display. Dr. Hammer, I believe it's time for the finale. With pleasure, Admiral. Hammer's fingers danced across his console, deploying the bubble guns. The what now? Reynolds asked, but his question was immediately answered as human ships launched what looked like oversized soap bubble wands. The devices activated, engulfing Vraxian vessels in shimmering, translucent spheres. Containment fields, Hammer explained with childlike glee, completely harmless to organic life, but they neutralize all weapon systems and propulsion. Basically, we've put their ships in timeout. Within minutes, the entire Vraxian fleet hung motionless in space, each ship encased in a gently pulsating bubble that occasionally changed color for aesthetic purposes, according to Dr. Hammer. High Commander Zrek stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His mighty armada, the pride of the Vraxian Empire, defeated without a single casualty on either side, not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through what appeared to be the human equivalent of practical jokes. High Commander, his communications officer said quietly, the Imperial Palace is hailing us. The Emperor demands an update. Zrek closed all four of his eyes briefly. Tell His Imperial Majesty that I request immediate diplomatic intervention. On the bridge of the completely reasonable response, Admiral Blackwood received the Vraxian surrender with a satisfied nod. Captain Reynolds, please inform Dr. Hammer that his weapons performed admirably, and have someone prepare a diplomatic shuttle. I believe we have negotiations to attend. Reynolds nodded, feeling a complex mixture of pride in humanity's capabilities and mild embarrassment at how thoroughly they'd shown off. Yes, Admiral. And may I say, this has been the most unnecessarily spectacular military operation I've ever witnessed. High praise indeed, Captain. High praise indeed. The Imperial Palace of the Vraxian Empire was a structure that reflected its builders' all angles and iridescent surfaces, designed to intimidate rather than welcome. It had served that purpose admirably when receiving tribute from conquered civilizations. Today, however, it would host very different visitors. Emperor Kraz perched uneasily on his crystalline throne, all 6 limbs twitching with agitation as he awaited the human delegation. Reports of the battle. He had reached him reports so outlandish that he had executed 3 messengers for presumed intoxication before accepting the humiliating truth. "Your Radiance," announced the court herald. "The human representatives approach. Let them enter." The Emperor chittered, and someone activate the intimidation lights. The throne room's bioluminescent panels pulsed threateningly as the massive doors swung open to admit the human delegation. Admiral Blackwood led the procession, wearing her full-dress uniform adorned with medals that caught and reflected the Vraxian lighting in a display that somehow managed to outshine their hosts. Captain Reynolds followed, along with Ambassador Cleavon of the Arcturus Collective, as a neutral mediator. What made the Vraxian court collectively gasp, however, was Dr. Hammer, who had insisted on attending and was wearing what he called his diplomatic attire, a suit covered in blinking LED lights programmed to display animated Vraxian surrender symbols. How he had acquired these symbols on such short notice was a question Reynolds decided he didn't want answered. "Emperor Kraz-Tuk," Admiral Blackwood announced, executing a bow that was precisely calculated to appear respectful, while subtly suggesting she was doing it as a courtesy rather than an obligation. "Humanity extends greetings," without hand gestures this time. She added with a smile that carefully concealed her teeth. The Emperor's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Vraxian equivalent of clearing one's throat. "Admiral Blackwood, your display of force has been noted. The Vraxian Empire is prepared to discuss terms." "Excellent," Blackwood replied. "Let me introduce Captain Mack Reynolds, who will serve as our primary negotiator. Captain Reynolds has extensive diplomatic experience and a thorough understanding of the misunderstanding that led to our current situation." Reynolds stepped forward, silently cursing Blackwood for putting him in this position. "Your Radiance, I am honored to represent humanity in these talks." The Emperor's compound eyes fixed on Reynolds. "You are the one who displayed the death gesture. As I've tried to explain, in human culture, that gesture is a greeting. We had no idea it held such different significance for your people. Yet you responded to our declaration of war with overwhelming force," the Emperor countered. "A force so excessive it bordered on theatrical." Reynolds exchanged a glance with Blackwood, who nodded slightly. "Your Radiance, may I speak frankly?" "You may. Humanity could have ended this conflict within hours of it beginning. Our technological capabilities far exceed the Vraxian Empire's current level. We chose not to." The Emperor's antennae twitched in confusion. "You chose not to win quickly?" "We chose to make a point," Reynolds explained. "In human culture, there's a concept called showing off. It means demonstrating your capabilities in a way that ensures they will not be forgotten. Like your ships with the face paintings and the light displays?" "Exactly. We wanted the Vraxian Empire to understand exactly what you were facing without actually causing harm. It was, in our view, the most humane approach." The Emperor leaned forward. "Are you saying that the display we witnessed was restrained?" Admiral Blackwood stepped in. "Your Radiance, what you saw represented approximately 3% of Earth's current military capacity, and we were very careful not to cause any casualties." A murmur ran through the Vraxian court. The Emperor's coloration shifted slightly, a sign of distress, according to Reynolds' cultural briefing. Ambassador Cleavon spoke for the first time. "If I may, Emperor Kraz-Tuk, my species has been observing humans for nearly a century. What Admiral Blackwood says is true. The display you witnessed was human restraint, not human aggression." Then, the Emperor's voice lowered. "What would unrestrained human aggression look like?" Dr. Hammer, who had been mercifully silent until now, perked up. "Oh, I have simulations I'd be happy to." "That won't be necessary, Doctor," Reynolds interrupted hastily. "Your Radiance, humanity would prefer not to demonstrate unrestrained aggression. We would much rather demonstrate unrestrained cooperation and cultural exchange." The Emperor considered this for a long moment. "You humans are peculiar. You respond to a declaration of war with a performance. You bring a warrior, a diplomat, a scientist, and an observer to peace talks, and now you offer friendship after humiliating our fleet. Cultural differences, Reynolds offered with a slight smile, lips carefully closed. To us, it would have been far more humiliating to treat you as a genuine threat requiring our full military response. This statement, while diplomatically questionable in Reynolds' opinion, seemed to strike a chord with the Emperor. I begin to understand, Krastuk said slowly. You were playing with us, as one might play with a juvenile. Reynolds winced internally at the characterization but recognized an opening. We prefer to think of it as proportional response. You declared war based on a misunderstanding. We responded with a demonstration rather than destruction. A demonstration that coincidentally revealed your species to be far more dangerous than we anticipated, the Emperor noted. A fortunate side effect, Blackwood said with a smile that managed to be both friendly and predatory at once. The Emperor rose from his throne, a gesture of respect in Vraxian culture. The Vraxian Empire acknowledges the misunderstanding. We propose an immediate cessation of hostilities and the establishment of formal diplomatic relations with humanity. Humanity accepts, Reynolds replied, relief washing over him. On one condition, the Emperor added, you must teach us this concept of showing off. It appears to be a most effective diplomatic tool. Reynolds glanced at Blackwood, who was failing to suppress a grin. I believe that can be arranged, Your Radiance. The treaty signing ceremony between the United Earth Government and the Vraxian Empire was, by any reasonable standard, completely over the top. Humanity, having found in the Vraxians an audience that genuinely appreciated excessive displays, pulled out all the stops. The ceremony was held in Earth orbit aboard the newly commissioned diplomatic vessel Peaceful Intentions, a ship 3 times larger than necessary, covered in decorative lighting, and featuring a treaty signing room with gravity projectors that allowed the participants to float majestically above a slowly rotating holographic display of both species' home systems. Is the anti-gravity really necessary? Reynolds asked as he adjusted his ceremonial uniform. The thing had more gold braiding than a 19th century field marshal's dress uniform. According to our Vraxian cultural attaché, they're loving every minute of it, Blackwood replied. She had somehow acquired a cape for the occasion. A cape? In space. Apparently Emperor Krastuk has already commissioned similar effects for his throne room. Reynolds shook his head in amazement. We've created a monster. They've gone from a warmongering empire to, what, fashion victims? I prefer to think of it as enthusiastic cultural exchange, Blackwood said. Dr. Hammer has been exchanging ideas with their weapons designers, purely for peacetime applications, of course. Of course, Reynolds echoed, not believing it for a second. The signing ceremony itself went off without a hitch, albeit with considerably more pomp and circumstance than any treaty signing in human history. The Vraxians, for their part, had embraced humanity's penchant for theatrics with alarming enthusiasm, arriving in ships newly decorated with elaborate patterns that pulsed in time with the ceremonial music. After the formalities concluded, Reynolds found himself on an observation deck with Emperor Krastuk, watching Earth rotate serenely below them. Your world is beautiful, Captain Reynolds, the Emperor said, much like mine, though the colors are different. Thank you, Your Radiance. I hope you'll have the opportunity to visit the surface during your stay. I look forward to it. The Emperor's mandibles moved in what Reynolds now recognized as the Vraxian equivalent of a thoughtful expression. You know, in 12 standard cycles of conquest, no species has ever responded to us as yours did. How did the others respond? They surrendered immediately. Or they fought conventionally and were defeated. The Emperor's compound eyes fixed on Reynolds. None of them turned warfare into, what did your Admiral call it? Performance art, Reynolds supplied. Yes, performance art. Most illuminating, the Emperor gestured toward the viewport. Word of our encounter has spread quickly through the galactic community. 3 species that were considering territorial expansion toward human space have suddenly discovered pressing business elsewhere. Reynolds couldn't help but smile. Fancy that. Indeed. It seems your Admiral's strategy of ridiculous overkill has accomplished precisely what she intended. The Emperor's antennae twitched in what Reynolds had learned was amusement. Tell me, Captain, is humanity always so excessive? Reynolds considered the question. Not always, Your Radiance. But we have found that when making a point to the galaxy at large, subtlety is often overrated. Later, at the reception following the treaty signing, Dr. Hammer approached Reynolds with an expression of mild disappointment. You know, Captain, I never got to deploy my best inventions. The tickle torpedoes, the bass drop disruptors, the glitter bombs. A terrible loss for interstellar warfare, I'm sure, Reynolds replied dryly. Oh well. Hammer sighed. There's always next time. Let's hope not. Later, across the reception hall, Admiral Blackwood was deep in animated conversation with several Vraxian military officials, apparently explaining the concept of flash mobs with disturbing enthusiasm. Ambassador Cleavon stood nearby, watching the proceedings with an expression that suggested they were mentally composing a very interesting report for their government. As the celebration continued, news of the Vraxian incident was already spreading across the galaxy. On hundreds of worlds, military analysts were frantically revising their assessments of human capabilities and intentions. The message was clear: humans might look soft and squishy, they might value peace and diplomacy, but cross them at your peril. Because what humans called overkill, other species were beginning to recognize as just getting started. 6 months later, Captain Reynolds, now Admiral Reynolds, sat in his office at Earth Fleet Headquarters reviewing diplomatic dispatches. The Vraxian Empire had become humanity's most enthusiastic ally, eagerly adopting human customs, particularly the showier ones, and serving as eager intermediaries for human diplomatic outreach. A message from Admiral Blackwood, now Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, flashed on his screen. Apparently our reputation precedes us. 3 species have requested alliance treaties this week alone. None of them have even met a human in person. Dr. Hammer sends his regards and says the Vraxians loved his singing toaster design. Reynolds laughed and shook his head. The greatest irony of the entire affair was now becoming clear throughout the galaxy. For all their apparent theatrics and showmanship, humans had actually shown remarkable restraint. And somehow that realization was more terrifying to potential adversaries than any weapon could ever be. Because if that was human restraint, what would happen if humanity ever truly lost its temper? The thought kept several galactic military strategists awake at night, which was, of course, entirely the point.